Good afternoon. We will now call to order this meeting of the Public Safety Standing Committee meeting. I will now begin by reading the emergency announcements and public speaker guidelines. Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use the exits to the left, right, or front of the council chamber or the east or west stairwell outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, proceed down 9th Street and enter the assembly area located in the former public safety building parking lot. Able persons should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. Persons wishing to speak during the public comment period and/or public hearings are generally allowed 3 minutes to speak. Persons appearing before the committee are not allowed to campaign for public office, promote prior business ventures, use language of a personal nature which assaults or demeans any person, including comments directed at public officials or staff members that are not related to their official duties, or address the question to staff members directly. All questions to be directed to the committee chair. Failure to adhere to the guidelines may result in speakers forfeiting any time and further disciplinary action as necessary, which can include barring from attendance at future meetings of the committee for a period of 6 months. That concludes the announcements. We will now move on to the public comment period. Is there anyone here present today that would like to speak about items not on today's agenda? Seeing none, the public comment period is now closed. We will now move on to the approval of the minutes. The minutes to be approved are from the April 22nd, 2025 Public Safety Standing Committee meeting and the May 9th, 2025 meeting. If there are no amendments or corrections, then the meeting minutes stand approved as presented. Those minutes have been approved. We will now move on to presentations. We have a presentation from Chief of Police Rick Edwards.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Edwards. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Richmond. Happy to be here, Chair Trammell, to discuss. You asked me to talk to you about our environmental officer program. Now, what I can tell you about that program, it works with other city agencies to enforce code violations throughout the city. So we have 4 precincts, as you know, in the City of Richmond, police precincts. And up until the last several years, we had 1 environmental officer per precinct. Through attrition retirement, we currently only have 1 that is currently working. Her name is Karen Spencer. She works at the 2nd precinct. The other 3 have since retired, and we have been unable to replace them in their current roles. I do think it is a very important program. It does help deal with some of the issues that don't rise to the level of violent crime, but they do contribute to violent crime through CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. As we know, issues such as graffiti, cars that are left unattended, certainly issues surrounding uncut grass and other blighted parts of our city need enforcement. And like many parts of the Richmond Police Department, we've had to put more jobs on some less people. And so Karen, while she's based in 2nd precinct, helps throughout the city. It's my goal to hire another hireback officer. That is a program you are aware of where we have retired Richmond police officers who come back and work part-time to do functions such as sit on TDO, ECOs. They also work as walking officers in certain parts of our city. And I would like to hire the right person to come back so we could at least have 1 south of the river and 1 north of the river to address the myriad of complaints that come not only from city council, but certainly from 311 with these code enforcement type issues involving cars. There are other partners that they do work with. We have the HOPE unit, which is our homeless outreach prevention enforcement unit, that we now have 2 officers doing that. And we also have our crisis response team, CRT, which partners 2 RPD officers with 2 clinicians from Richmond Behavioral Health, because many of the issues we get called about are multi-pronged problems, such as drug abuse and mental health and homelessness. So it's 1 team working closely together. But I think What I would love to see when we bring our staffing numbers back up is that each precinct can have an environmental officer. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about that topic.
Thank you, Chief. In terms of the environmental officer and the Hope Outreach team and the CRT team, are those civilianized jobs? Or are those all the higher back program?
Those are all just regular sworn police officers.
Okay.
So I think there may be an opportunity to civilianize some of those roles. As you know, I've went line by line, and there are some opportunities for what sworn police officers do that we can civilianize. These roles, I think, benefit from having a sworn police officer because they can issue criminal citations to people, go to court. They can obviously make custodial arrests should that be needed. But there are many other civilians that work for the city that they partner with, specifically Department of Public Works.
And then, I mean, you said that there were 4 environmental officers. You're trying to get back up to 2. I mean, would 4 be the ideal though? And it's just a logistics situation right now.
Yes, absolutely. I think there would be enough work. If you had Officer Spencer up here, she would say she has plenty of work to do for just second precinct, and we've had to ask more of her. But just like all of us, when you're 20% down in staffing, we are all finding ourselves doing multiple roles. But I could definitely find enough work for each of them. And I think it works really well because I want to do quick turnarounds on those 311 complaints. I want to be able, when you or your colleagues from city council call us, that we can have a quick response to address some of these quality of life issues. And while there's certainly many other civilians within city government that work in this space, I think it works best with a partnership with a sworn law enforcement officer. So ideally, I would love to get back to 4.
Is there anything that we can do as a standing committee body or as a council body to help support your efforts in recruiting so you have 4 environmental officers?
We'll continue to get the word out. Both of you attended my last graduation for our class about a month ago, where there were 23 new officers. That's the biggest class we've had since 2019. We're having a hiring day today, so I would just love to get the word out that the Richmond Police Department is still hiring. We have about 70 openings we're trying to fill this calendar year alone. And if you know people, or if people are listening to this and they know someone that will make a great Richmond police officer, to please send them our way.
Thank you.
Chief, you said that you only have one. It's just Karen that's doing the whole city. So she's just not in not in second precinct anymore. She's all over.
She's based out of second precinct, but she handles complaints from the precinct captains and from city council members throughout the city. It's a lot of work for her.
I know that every day I'm getting all these different calls, just like earlier, gave some more properties to Kevin, because the citizens are really, really upset, with all the rain that we've had and all of that. It looks like the neighbors aren't cutting their grass, or the tenants aren't cutting the grass, keeping the properties, up to code. So then you got rats coming in over there. You got snakes because there's so much rain and people's backyards are flooded. And so they're upset because they said they call second precinct, which I told them call 311 or call me. I just got some pictures just now of a property, 2 different properties, that they're upset because the grass is like, somebody told them it had to be 12 feet high. 12 feet high would be how much? Like
double as tall.
So they're upset because they don't understand why you got to wait for the grass or bushes to be over 12 feet high before you can turn it in. So that's not true. No.
Well, I think certainly while we encourage people to use 311, we know that many of our citizens will call me, they'll call you, and we want to make sure that we're responding in a timely manner. But there is a bandwidth issue currently with RPD when it comes to this. However, if you do have complaints, please let me know about it and we will prioritize them.
And Chief, I think a lot of citizens are kind of upset because they do not, like with Karen, like we would call her, but the tires that are being discarded all over the place, just everywhere, not only in the 8th district, but all over the city. So they're like, do they call her? Because when that happens, they still don't always get picked up because, well, when they do, you know what I'm talking about over there by Dale Avenue. Look how many times we've cleaned that up behind the motel. And then every time you go back, it's more stuff thrown out there. And so the neighbors are asking me again yesterday, how come we don't have cameras or something up over there? And I said, because it's a delicate situation, because if you put the cameras up, they can tear them down. And then, you know, that defeats the purpose.
Well, we would still like to, one of the things that our officers can bring to the table is that investigative side. Now, tires being dumped are very difficult. There's obviously no vehicle identification number on them. It's hard to track back, but we will look at cameras. We can put up trail cams, which are, if there's a spot where they continuously dump, we have had success with that in the past, getting license plates from people who are doing that work and then prosecuting them. People are dumping those tires because they don't want to pay the fees that it would cost to dispose of them properly, and they're left in, you know, in the hidden areas of our city or behind businesses. So we would still, that's why I think even if we were to totally civilianize the code enforcement side of it, I think having a police officer attached helps because we have access to all the databases we need to conduct thorough investigations.
Then again, okay, something a little bit different. With abandoned cars, people do not understand. The abandoned cars that's on the street, that is the police, they can tag the cars. But if the vehicles are in somebody's yard with no tags, just been sitting for like years or whatever, that does not fall into, that's what they don't understand. How come when they call, like Second Precinct or call the police, they can't go into the property to tag the vehicles because that has to fall under code enforcement, which I got the email earlier, and I'll ask Kevin more about that because I know that you've explained it over and over that police officers cannot go on private property, but they can tag them if they're on the street.
Yes, if they're on the
Right.
street, we'll put one of those pink tags on it. They have 72 hours to move it. If not, we tow it in sight. So
How
I
long?
think
How long did you say?
72 hours.
All right, I'll let Juanita know that because I think some's still out there.
Well,
I'll
the
let-
first step is putting that sticker on there, and then the clock starts, and we'll follow up on it.
All right, I appreciate everything you do because I know that I'm always hearing how accessible you are to the citizens and to us council members. And I know that I'm speaking for myself, but I know I can speak for my colleagues on this committee because we really appreciate you. Because like I said, you take these calls and you hold your officers accountable, even your staff, for them to help us with the situations that we have, because you know that our citizens are demanding more from council members.
Yes.
So then we come after, we ask for the police to please help us because we couldn't do this by ourselves.
Well,
And I
you're
appreciate
the conduit to our community, and we appreciate you. There are people that will speak to their council member and maybe don't want to talk to police. So I think that's a way that we can make our city better by cooperating with each other.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you so
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will now have a presentation from Kevin Vonk, Director of the Department of Planning and Development Review.
I'm back up. It's all right. Let's start here. Good afternoon, Kevin J. Vong, Director of Planning and Development Review. Here to provide an update on our Property Maintenance and Code Enforcement Division. Also with me here today is Russell Williams. He's Program and Operations Manager in PMCE. Our Deputy Director, Michelle Coward, is out today at training, so we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. In terms of where PMC fits. PDR covers a lot of different aspects of the built environment. PMCE is one of our major divisions. And what do? We enforce primarily two sections of city code. Chapter 5 deals with the building code, which is adopted from the state building code, and it deals with defective maintenance, and it also deals with unsafe structures. We do have the ability to declare structures unfit for human habitation, and so that's usually a last resort, but we deal with the building code, and then also as just referenced, Chapter 11, which is our environmental code dealing with tall grass and also accumulation of refuse. So our team primarily responds to enforcing, but also educating and educating our residents on their rights and responsibilities when it comes to maintaining their property in terms of maintaining compliance with both building and environmental code. A little update on activities we did last year in 2024. We had over 4,200 new code cases started. We issued just over 4,000 NOVs, notices of violation. 1,000 of those were for defective maintenance, 2,500 for environmental, and we had 308 unsafe structures. This is just a little graph that shows distribution of our notice of violations. So District 3 followed by District 6, and then close 7 and 8 in terms of where we issue most of these violations. So you can see there's, I'll say, disparity in terms of where these are issued. And I will also, point out in terms of the notices of calls. Sometimes we do have cases that that do not result in a violation, or there's not one observed, but this is just some of the distribution of where these NOVs occur throughout the city. Also in 2024, we closed over 7,500 cases. 5,000 of them were compliant. 2,200, we did not observe a violation. One of the things that I always like to point out is that minimum standards for building code, environmental code may not always be at the same level as neighborhood expectations. And so I just think it's really important. Minimum building code is not pretty, it's not beautiful, but it is safe. And so I think it's important in terms of our education. And again, following Code of Virginia, we're limited in what we can do, but we will make sure that they are compliant to code. There's also a handful of cases that were actually closed non-compliant, and then there's I'll say a separate thread in terms of usually it are cases where we're not able to make contact or identify a property owner. And so those move into a different realm, and our attorney that we work with, Mr. Lukanowski, he could probably answer some questions in terms of like how we deal with those through the court system, ultimately because our goal, right, is compliance. But sometimes we have to close them out from a property maintenance standpoint and move them on to a different set of jurisdiction. We also abated 193 properties. So abatement primarily is cutting grass and weeds, and it can also include boarding of unsafe structures. If you have a vacant structure, you're allowed to keep a vacant structure. You just have to keep it secure. And sometimes you need to board it in order to make it secure. And if you don't board it, we'll board it for you and charge it back to the property. But as far as abatement goes, the same thing in terms of cutting the grass. You provided opportunities to remedy the situation. And if you don't, we work with a third-party contractors to go and cut it for you. And again, charge it back to the property. Also, some things we did, we coordinate demolitions in the city. So we issued 70 demolition permits. 69 of those were at the request of the property owner. One of them we actually initiated, and that was because of an impending unsafe structure. So we do have the authority through the Commissioner of Buildings. If a building gets to a point in terms of where it cannot be rehabilitated and causes a danger potentially to the public, we can order a demolition of that structure, and we did one last year. We also moved 14 derelict buildings into compliance. We have a derelict building program that talks about taking structures that have been, again, building code issues and vacant, bringing them into compliance means making them habitable again and providing another housing unit, bringing that back online. We added 199 vacant buildings to our registry, with 550 total vacant buildings right now. We update that list every 6 months. Some say it's not complete. So if you suspect a building to be vacant, please let us know and we will investigate. A vacant building also means it's disconnected from utilities, so it's really vacant. And I will say there are different sets of standards from the building code perspective of an occupied versus a vacant building. And again, the bar for a vacant building is lower in terms of what you need to do, but you are allowed to maintain a vacant building in the city, as well as the Commonwealth, so long as you keep it in a state of basic good repair. Vacant buildings, this is a map of those 500 throughout the city of Richmond. So the map on the left shows where they're actually located. And then on the right is a heat map, so you can see the pockets where we do have some additional vacancy. I think this correlates too, right? Some of the complaints or notices of violation we have in parts of the 3rd district and 7th and 8th, where we sometimes have some correlation between vacancy and property maintenance code issues. Part of our engagement also involves some coordination with other agencies. So police is one of them. We have a daytime citywide code enforcement team that works out on about a monthly basis, going through and looking at specific nodes or corridors within the city to proactively look or address maybe where we've continued to have a number of complaints in the past. So it's PDR, and within PDR, it's PMCE, permits and inspections, our zoning team. As I mentioned, it's the police department, it's fire, it's also finance, and making sure there's compliance with business licenses, taxes that may be outstanding, the health district, and this is primarily for restaurateurs to make sure that they are up to code with all of their permits and inspections. And so in 2024, we held 25 meetings, and the map shows these are the areas where we did our proactive inspections. Ultimately, there were 15 inspections where we went out, and the 15 are on the map there, resulted in 45 properties. We issued 80 notices of violation, with ultimately those NOVs included 462 different deficiencies. And it was a cumulative effort of 395 staff hours to do that. So that is an update on our activities for 2024, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Vonk. So can you explain to me the difference between when you say that what a non-compliant, or between compliant and no violation observed?
Sure. So when a case is closed, so we'll get a call, we'll get a complaint, and we'll go out and send a inspector to evaluate the property. And so the first would be no violation observed, is like we looked at the property and we check the code, check the building code, check the environmental code, and we do not see any violation. And so then that case is closed out. There's no violation observed. And so again, it may not be pretty, but in terms of checking the boxes, there was actually no violation. Compliant means it went through the process. And so we issued a notice of violation, and then the property owner complied, right? They made the repair, they cut the grass, they did what was required to be in compliance. So when we had our follow-up visit, they were found to be compliant. So the case was closed as compliant.
Okay.
And then that third category was non-compliant. There's some issues where, we struggle with trying to find property owners. So that's how that process works in terms of closing out a case.
Okay, thank you. And then as much of your work, a constituent had mentioned to me that in the past, there was much more proactive code enforcement, and now it's more reactive based on, residents submitting 311 requests or city council people. Is that, I didn't know if that was true or not.
Yeah, I would say, the volume of our workload is primarily reactive and responsive. I think I've been with the city and in this position for, over 4 years. And I think what we've been working on is trying to understand the right balance for that team to have. The last few years, we've reestablished, I'll say, 2 proactive teams. I talked here about daytime, which is led by PMCE. We also have a nighttime, which is led by our Commissioner of Buildings, and that deals primarily with nightclubs, and I'll say after hours operations and places that shouldn't have nightclubs. But for the daytime one, with our staff, we've really tried to look at and using data in terms of where we consistently may be getting some complaints, trying to work with council members to understand like areas where there may be, I'll say, things not just related to property maintenance. And that is maybe there's issues with like zoning and type of use. Maybe there's issues with like taxes. Maybe there's actually issues with other levels of crime involved. And so I think with that, we are trying to be reestablish some of that proactive nature in a targeted manner where we may be able to, I'll say, join with other departments to really make a difference in terms of like, hey, it's not just a building code violation, but there's also, health code or finance or other things involved in that. And so I will say, right now, our ability to handle that coordinated effort, I'll say comes with the team that we have in place right now.
And then I know that if we implement this rental inspection district, how will that impact your staffing needs? And is that something that we're already starting to take into account for the 26-27 budget?
Yes. So council introduced last night an ordinance to establish a residential rental inspection program. And so in short, right, it allows us to establish districts where we can go by and do proactive inspections. I think part of the discussion, this is, I'll say, part 1 of the ordinance, is that it recommends or it would establish a program, but it does not establish any district. And so I think what we would want to do or recommend is, kind of eyes wide open. If council passes this ordinance and they go back and say they want to establish a district, to have that conversation about, all right, in that district, how big is it going to be? How many units are in there? And to what degree would that impact us in terms of additional staff who would need to do those inspections? I've said just, loosely, if we went because it requires or allows for a proactive inspection once every 4 years. If we, I'll say, take a Henrico approach and look at a very small targeted district, we may be able to capture it with what we have in terms of being fully staffed and maybe just a few additional inspectors. If we end up, for some reason, creating 6 districts with thousands of apartment units in it, we will need more staff to do that. And so I think part of that, discussion of districts should be done, I'll say, in the fall prior to the budget creation, just to understand, what those resources would be needed. But right now, without any districts on the books, I think in terms of, I will just say one of our challenges is we do have some vacancies and just trying to keep up fully filled. I think I'm going to look at the time I've been here. We've got 4 right now, but I was thinking, there was a period where we were fully filled it lasted about a month.
And what is fully filled?
How many on the ground? What's that? 32? Yeah, 32 field inspectors. And so one of the things that we do is also, I would say, we operate in accordance with the police precincts in terms of the 4 throughout the city. Obviously, they're not evenly balanced because we're trying to respond to the need, but 32 overall, and we shift as needed to be able to cover the city.
And then just one last question. I had a constituent bring up I think a rather interesting point, which was that with a movement towards sort of greener sustainability, a lot of people are doing, no-mow May and, in months with a lot of rain that could end in a code violation of over 12 inches. Is there any consideration for like well kept but unkempt yards that are, specifically designed to support pollinators and the environment? This is a very 4th district question, so.
Sure. I think one of the things that we would want to do is if we were to establish that is just have a very solid SOP in terms of like what it means for interpreting. Because right, one person's tall grass and pollinator garden is another person's like, right, weed fest. And so
Yeah.
we do kind of look at in terms of overall, I think part of the words in the ordinance talk about like managed. And so to what degree are things being managed versus, especially when you look at species that are invasive and really are tough to manage. And I'm looking at the attorney because I think, you know, in some cases we've dealt with bamboo and in terms of how that has, right, bamboo is really tough to manage. And so I think part of it would be is if we were to, there was a desire to have some allowance, just making sure that from an operating perspective, we were very clear in terms of how we're going to be enforcing that, just so we can be consistent, right, throughout the district and throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
I have some questions. Don't understand with this rental inspection, because to me, how come that the insurance companies don't go around and investigate the properties that they should? Because I know that I've heard from other landlords that they get cited because the tenants won't cut the grass, or the tenants tell the landlord, you don't have the right to come on my property. So then they get canceled because you try to get somebody in the courts, and how long does that take? And that might be a question for Luke, because I know that I'm hearing from different landlords myself. And to me, it's not fair that it's our properties, but yet though we're told we can't go on the property, and then the grass is like 6 foot high in the backyard with all these vehicles and everything else, and you get canceled, and it takes months and months and months to try to find somebody to insure your property once an insurance company cancels you. So how is this all going to work with the rental inspection, and then with the landlord that says, well, I got a tenant that basically told me I'm not allowed on the property? And then when you do finally get someone in court, how long does that take? Another process for them to cut the property or to come up to the code that's supposed to be in the city. And also, I know that's a lot. I'm just,
Do you want me?
you can help me with those.
All right, I'll take
now,
a try.
because I'm trying to read what I'm
Yep.
getting and then trying to convey it back to you, because you know every day and when I look at this chart, it just doesn't seem right. In an 8th district, it's down this low when I know how many calls I get 7 days a week in reference to the grass or people building without a permit. And then how long does it take, you know, for you to send somebody to that property to stop a work order, and they still continue it like 12 o'clock at night? What's going on Richmond Highway right now?
So back up. In terms of, you know, responsiveness, I think if you look at when a complaint comes in or a request comes in, generally we're able to get out there in 3 days or less. Obviously, there's certain situations that are more health safety concerns that, you know, we'll get somebody out there like that day to look at things. We do a lot of coordination, or I'll say the divisions, PMCE and permits and inspections when it comes to unauthorized work and doing stop work orders. You know, part of the challenge with a stop work order is, you know, identifying, right, like active construction or seeing it under happening, you know, and issuing that, but also, you know, sometimes I feel like, you know, we just need some babysitters because, right, you issue the stop work order, you post it on the door, and like you're not even going 20 minutes and then things are fired up again. So, I mean, I think there are some stipulations in terms of for those who violate, I'll say progressive discipline, but ultimately like playing out through the courts. You know, I think Attorney Lukanowski can attest to the deference that's given to property owners and makes it a challenge, I think, for us as a city sometimes to enforce some of those things. Where I want to go in terms of answering the questions on the rental inspection. So ultimately, our notice of violation when it comes to, any code related thing, and whether it's building code, environmental code, zoning code, it ultimately relies or ties back to the owner of the property. And so the landlord of the property. For us, and in terms of, right, because it's a violation of a piece of property, there's no way for us to like always track, right, who's the tenant or who's responsible. And so our role is to say, look, whoever the property owner is, they're ultimately responsible. There's a whole separate section of, right, private transactions in terms of landlord tenant, right? Who's responsible for cutting the grass? Who's responsible for doing these types of things? We don't get involved in that. And I could say, like, personally, it doesn't matter to us, like, who's doing it. At the end of the day, the landlord or the property owner needs to figure out how that's going to get done, because they're the ones who are going to be, I'll say, in court in terms of like enforcing things. When it comes to the rental inspection, I think, and part of the reason for proposing legislation that's split in two is to say, look, there's an interest in establishing a program, but ultimately, like, where we would want to do a rental inspection district, like, there's a lot of nuance in that. And I think I'll probably repeat the same thing when this comes before, I think it's going to land use in July, is discussing about when it comes time to creating the district, like being very eyes wide open about like what that needs. And I think in terms of also like the resources, two things. One is really for us to focus on areas with like the most extreme health, safety, welfare violations, where people are living in really squalid conditions. I don't think we have the resources right now to just go out and proactively inspect every rental property within the city. And so to focus on those that really have the most severe conditions, and I think also demonstrated by the tenants are the ones, approaching council saying, hey, council, put us into a rental inspection district. We want, because we acknowledge we're kind of in this place where we kind of feel stuck. And so ultimately, I'll say it's council who's going to decide where, well, one, if we have a program, but two, like where those districts are. And so I think in terms of, casting a broad net, is not really the intent of that district, but to really look at, all right, where you council feel, and maybe based on tenants coming to you saying, hey, help us out, is where that would go. And I would also say the inspection district doesn't take anything away from just us being able to respond to a complaint. So even if we do a proactive inspection and we go in there and it passes and something happens like hours after we leave, that tenant can call us and allow us to come in and re-inspect the property. And I think, we can also say there's a number of cases where, operating under the ability of tenants to let us in, right? They're faced with a very tough choice sometimes. And that is, we say with all our inspectors, we cannot unsee things. And so if we see a violation, like, we have to report it, we have to mark it down. And in some cases, what is the toughest is, right, where we have violations of unsafe structures where somebody actually now can't live there. And so just concerns about, creating situations where somebody could be unhoused makes it a very difficult subject. And I think it just, warrants a lot of conversation on it.
Then you know what? Then maybe your department or whatever, maybe you all need to go out there and start taking pictures of all of the apartments, all the rental homes and stuff like that, when the landlord fixes it up and rents it out, and then the tenant comes in there and decides, okay, I'm mad, so I'm going to do this and do that. Then I'm going to call the city and get them to come out here and condemn the property. And then what happens? Because a lot of times, I mean, I can't speak for all the landlords, but I'm quite sure that they're not going to get a piece of property and just not even fix it up or do anything with it and just start renting them out for the money that they're getting. And then what happens? To me, and like I said at the beginning, to me, why aren't the insurance companies going out there like they do certain landlords and look at their properties for whatever the reason, and then decide to cancel them because the landlord is trying to work with the tenant, but the tenant decides that he or she is not going to do what the landlord is asking them because they don't have the right to come on that property, which I don't think that's correct, which I'll look into that more because that's what people are asking me. If they go and they get a letter from the agent that says, hey, we're in the neighborhood and we saw that there's abandoned cars in the yard and stuff like that, what are you doing about it? I give them a notice. They didn't do nothing. Call code enforcement. It didn't happen in time until it got canceled. Then you still got tenants living in there and you got to have insurance on that property. And that's correct, if you have tenants in a property, because that's what I was asked yesterday. Do I have to have insurance? I think you do. I know you do if you have mortgages. I mean, this right here, Luke, I know that you've been doing this for a long, long time and you go to court. And I know that sometimes, probably a lot of times, you get disgusted with what the judges do as far as with these evictions, or we're trying to get, not per se the landlord, but someone to clean it all up. Can you help me with that? How long, if you put a notice on somebody's door and they're still there, they refuse to leave, the landlord can't do anything, what happens then? I would love to have that answer. I can't hear you.
Greg Lukanowski, Deputy City Attorney. The code inspectors from Mr. Vonk's department have told me if they issue 100 notices of violation, over 90 of them, people are going to comply with. It's that other less than 10 that we're dealing with in court. In the rental property situation, the law says either the owner of the property, the landlord, or the tenant or the occupant is responsible. The city doesn't care who the city reaches out to enforce. Oftentimes, and I have seen it happen, that landlords do have problems, but there are solutions under the Virginia Landlord Tenant Act. Landlord's right to inspect, to enter the property with notice to repair, etc. That situation comes up several times a year.
How many inspectors do you have?
So field inspectors were authorized for 32 and we're at 28 right now.
What about per se, like south side, north side? Let's take south side.
Yeah, so I would say fewest is probably first precinct? Just 3.
I'm
But
sorry.
on south side I'll invite you up. You can come on up. So I'm going to bring up Mr. Williams. He manages the 4 precincts. So I think he can answer specific questions about just resource allocation and then what we do in terms of where we have inspectors and maybe pull them.
Good afternoon, Russell Williams, Operations Manager. First precinct is 3. Third precinct is 3. Second precinct is 4. Fourth precinct is 4. Special programs have 5. And we have 4 vacancies altogether.
Thank you. Kevin, what I'd like to have, if you can, is to break it down. You don't have to do that today. When you get a chance, break it down to what, like with abandoned cars, with the high grass, like yesterday, right there, because I got a developer that called very upset because the apartments that he owns on this side, where the Brady Square apartments are, the grass is so high, it's up to where the stop sign is. That whole that whole area needs to be cut. We don't know if the city owns that or if it's in foreclosure right now, that we've been told it is. All that property is in foreclosure. But what about, we can't let that keep, getting so tall, out of control, that it's now affecting over here where these people live in the There used to be Madison Arms Apartments. But if you can help me with
Sure.
that, go ahead.
Yeah. We met with what we felt was going to be a team to maybe revive that project a few months ago. Unfortunately, that has not materialized. And I think working with our colleagues in HCD, right? The toughest projects are the ones that get half built, right? Because it's like somebody likes either a clean slate or they want to purchase something that's already done. Like when it's halfway there, you don't know, like, right, what was done. And so this one's very tough in terms of restarting. I think from the enforcement perspective, we'll have for our discussion, team going back out there to look at the grass and any other violations that may be existing in terms of part of those buildings are, I'll say, semi-secure, but to make sure that they are secure, ones that are further along. I think one of the education things is also when it comes to enforcement, you as a property owner are responsible for your property, but you're also responsible for maintaining the right-of-way out to the center line of the street and the center line of the alley. So you are responsible for maintaining that. So grass, weeds, vegetation that are occurring in the terrace or on the curb line or, in the back between, I'll just say your backyard or the garage and the center line of the alley, you as a property owner are responsible for that. So in this case, the Brady Square owner would be responsible for both the private and any public right of way that is impacted around there.
I don't think that's fair, per se. Like on Walmsley Boulevard, how you going to ask those seniors over there when when those cars are going about 80 miles an hour down Walmsley Boulevard, and then you want them to come out there and cut all the way to the street and get hit or get their lives put in danger and it looks horrible over there because those citizens are telling me they pay high-ass taxes and they're not going to go out there and risk their lives to cut all the way to the ditch line where those vehicles are just flying down the road. They're even asking for me to please put speed tables over there on Walmsley Boulevard because it is so bad now. So do you go out and do that, or does that fall under Public Works? Does Bobby Vincent go out there? Why don't we take some grass killer and just kill all the weeds?
Sure. So, I mean, that is a section of code that we have to look at enforcing consistently. And I will agree in terms of it does present some challenges in some particular areas. I look at Councilmember Abubaker. We dealt with a situation in her district, same type of thing in terms of a side yard being adjacent to a very busy arterial and not having that understanding of who was responsible for maintaining it. I think that is something if the body wanted to discuss amending portions or other areas, right, where that would not be the responsible, but obviously then there's a cost to that in terms of like what we do from a Public Works perspective of now maintaining things that we wouldn't otherwise maintain. But I do understand and acknowledge, right, that there's some areas where it's like, yeah, that side yard is dangerous because it is very close, to our arterial or some busy road, especially a number of them on South Side where there's not really a terrace, right? It's very close to the street. But for as of right now, the way the code is written, we have to interpret that consistently. And so, we do the best we can in terms of trying to educate or work on can it be planted or vegetated or unvegetated in certain ways so you don't have to maintain it as much. But fortunately, here in the South, a lot grows and a lot grows very quickly.
I do want to say thank you for your support and education for that particular constituent. And I did put something in my newsletter to make sure that all the residents knew. I think a lot of people didn't know that was the responsibility of the homeowner. And so, yes, I think that there are spots where it's very dangerous, and we should look into something that, or it could be like a third party support program that we have. But I agree.
Thank you, Sarah. Kevin, thank you for all your hard work. I know that you take my calls all the time, and I know that it looks like when there's a holiday at City Hall, that's when they start doing like after you put a stop work order on something that looks like they go back over there when they know it's a holiday or weekend and they start doing it all over again. Then the citizens are screaming because they can't get nobody at City Hall. But I appreciate you answering my calls all the time, and I appreciate what you do, you and your your team. Appreciate all of that. Because I know it's with, and that's what people don't understand. I keep telling the population, as Sabrina said, over 223,000 citizens, and it's growing. So guess what? You got more people, you got more, houses that we need, apartments, affordable and all that. But the tenants have to do their part and work with the landlords and just do what the lease says, cut your grass and don't have these abandoned cars and don't cause problems in the neighborhood. So that's what I have a problem with the rental inspection, because to me, it's not always the landlord. A lot of times, sometimes it's the tenants. Like they say, it's always two sides to a story. Sometimes there's three. But thank you. Thank you. And I would like to have something like that, Kevin, so we could put it in our packages for our meeting for July the 12th. I mean, 10th, July the 10th.
Great. We'll work on that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'm gonna just take a couple of minutes to thank Chip Decker. With our meeting that we had last month, June the 12th, we had a senior that's been to just about every one of our meetings for years and years. She'd been very sick. She caught the caravan. I begged her not to come, but she came to the meeting anyway. I told her I'd take her home, and you could tell that she was having a hard time breathing. And when I noticed that something was not right with her, I yelled for you to come over there and help. And the firefighters, they were there and got her to the hospital. And she made it for a few weeks, but she passed away. And she was loved our meetings, loved the music and dancing and all of that. And I just want to say thank you for always coming to our meeting for the past 16 years. I think you've only missed like 2 because you couldn't be there. You had to go to a training or whatever. But anyway, I just want to say, and the family want to thank you and our firefighters that was there that tried to save her. And Chief, thank you for coming to our meeting to let us know that you witnessed what we were seeing. And it wasn't a pretty sight when you got two young girls that want, or ladies, want to come out of the woods and ask you for a date. Believe me, they did. They've even asked me and Gail for if we had some time. We basically told them no, thank you. But thank you for bringing that to us, and please if you can give us a report, because the neighbors over there are saying that it's still just as bad. And the owner of the motel, he is very upset because they keep damaging his property. Thank you. Thank you for all that y'all do. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is July. Thank you. God bless y'all.